Welcome. Thank you all for spending your noon hour with us. We're really excited to have this conversation. My name is Victoria. If I haven't had the privilege of meeting you, I am the ED at Bottom Line here in New York, and I have the privilege of facilitating this conversation today. So we're going to be focused on our emergency funding stream and how we support students with their basic needs and things that are coming up outside of their college degree and college expenses. So again, I'm Victoria. I use the she series pronouns. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Janelle, who is our success program director, and then Katie, who is a success team manager and also leads the emergency funding team. So you'll be hearing lots of their voices today and sharing a bit more about this work, how it's evolved, how we're supporting students, and the future moving forward. Before we jump in, wanted to just guide the conversation and set some context for everybody. So if this is one of your first entry points to Bottom Line, welcome. We're so excited you're here. Bottom Line's mission is that we partner with students to get into and through the right college and onto a meaningful career. So we operate two integrated programs, a college access program supporting students in their senior year as they complete lots of college applications. It's a big time for that. And make a decision in terms of college. And then our persistence work, which we call Success, which Janelle and Katie both work on in supporting students while they're enrolled in college to ensure that they're on track for graduation and can launch a meaningful career. And so part of the holistic support we're offering students is in the form of our smaller budget around emergency funding, which is what we'll be diving into today. For those of you who are champions of this work, you likely know that the barriers to college completion have grown higher in recent years, but the goals of our students remain consistent. We still have students who are striving for that college degree, really wanting a mobilizing job, and there are lots of barriers in their way in order to get there. And so that's why Bottom Line exists, and that's the space in which we operate. We also know that financial hurdles and emergencies disproportionately impact the population we serve, primarily first-generation college-going students and students coming from low-income backgrounds and communities of color. This has only broadened throughout the pandemic, right? I think the pandemic kind of highlighted a lot of the inequities that were already existing and a lot of the financial need that students had. And so we are seeing that need continue to grow. And though we're focused on college persistence, we understand that basic needs and the student's ability to focus on college is contingent on their ability to not have to worry about where their next meal is coming from, or if they can buy their books, or if they're going to remain in their house. And so that's what this discussion is focused on. We do have an emergency funding built into our budget each year, and so that we're disseminating to students to make sure that they have the access to overcome some of these challenges. And then we really think about it as a financial safety net. Though in an ideal world, we have all the funding and the need for our students, it really is truly an emergency fund, right? We're coaching students in terms of how to access resources and other funds that might be available to them and making affordable decisions for college to really set themselves up for success. And we understand that lots of things come up, even in the best of circumstances, and so want to make sure that we're supporting students in accessing the funds they need to be successful. And just a couple of community agreements. So trusted space, right? It takes a tremendous amount of bravery and vulnerability for students to come to Bottom Line with these requests. We are not going to be naming any of our students kind of by name or anything identifying, right, in observance of that privacy and that respect of the relationship that they hold with Bottom Line and with their advisor. We believe it's important to uplift stories, right? That's what you're all here to understand. What are the challenges that our students are facing and how you can help without kind of identifying students in their specific moment, their specific circumstance in a way that wouldn't be empowering for them. And then ask questions, right? You're all here because you're curious about this work, which we really appreciate. Hopefully we'll be answering lots of those questions during the conversation today, but feel free to use the chat. We're going to be holding some time at the end to answer some of those questions. So you can either pop them in as we go along and we'll catalog them for the end, or you can feel free to contribute to the space when we get to the Q&A section. I'm going to hand it over to Janelle.
Good morning, everyone. Just want to go over our emergency fund mission. So the Bottom Line Emergency Fund exists to support Bottom Line New York Success students with crucial expenses, particularly with any financial barriers that threaten their well-being and or their ability to persist in college. So we'll discuss a little bit more what these expenses can look like as we go through the presentation. In addition to awarding funds to individual students whose applications are approved, the emergency funding team also seeks to collaborate with advisors and connect students with external resources to avert future crises and support the students in building long-term financial stability. So again, we'll discuss a little bit more about what those additional resources look like throughout the presentation.
Hi, everyone. So also just wanted to provide a little bit of additional detail on our emergency funding team. Currently, we have 4 members who are most directly involved in the emergency fund from our staff. So that's Janelle, who is a crucial bridge between programs and a number of important leaders and other teams that support this work. She is also a hero, filling out approximately 1 million pounds of financial paperwork per semester to get the money out where it needs to be. And then myself and 2 senior college success advisors all split a combination of project management and process improvement work with the actual review and distribution of funds to students based on their applications. All of our college success advisors are also a crucial part of this process. They are the ones with the most direct and trusting relationships with students. So students will let their advisor know about a pressing need first, and the advisor will then coach them through the process of submitting an application for the emergency fund. And also the advisor tends to be the one most directly hearing about the impact of a student who is able to be approved for funding afterwards. We'll speak a little more to their actual decision-making process later, but also did want to highlight that we have a full committee of 6 Bottom Line staff members who review larger requests, typically requests that are over about $1,000 per student or more. That is chiefly advisors, and we are also fortunate to have one amazing representative from the development team. So that really is also fantastic for visibility and connectivity across our teams. Finally, also our student advisory board has been an amazing source of insight throughout this process. So while they are not ongoing regular members of the emergency funding team, they've also supported us with a lot of valuable feedback that has shaped this process throughout the years.
Thanks, Kitty. Thanks, Janelle. So we're going to start off with a little poll quiz, if you will. And so we're going to rely on some technology here, which is working perfectly. So go ahead and pick the choice that you think is how much we are distributing in FY24 for our emergency fund, and then we'll close it and share the answer. If you're having any issues with the poll, you can also feel free to write your response in the chat. All right. Well, we got a savvy group on the call. 62% of folks shared that they thought it was 100K, which is correct. We are distributing $100,000 in emergency funding this year. So though I wish it was 200,000, unfortunately it's not, but luckily more than 50. So thanks all for participating. Great. Well, I'm going to pose some questions to Katie and Janelle, and they'll share a little bit more about this work. And so one of the things is the visibility of this work has kind of transformed over recent years, and wanted to walk you through a little bit about how this kind of funding stream and program more broadly has been built out. So yeah, Katie and Janelle, kick it off.
Thank you. So with this work, we really wanted to think through like what has happened, what the shift was. So this used to be word of mouth. So when we initially started the scholarship, it used to be something that was word of mouth, and our students would ask through their advisors about getting access to the funding. Then COVID happened, and the pandemic really shed light to the issue we were really aware of. The need of our students is very great. The rest of society definitely started paying attention more, which led to a greater visibility to something we at Bottom Line knew to be true. The cost of college and the toll it takes financially can be really enormous for our students, in addition to outside of college needs. So sometimes our students have issues with food insecurity or needing to take help with bills for them and their families, right? Especially during COVID, a lot of our students, their parents may have lost their jobs. So again, like those things became much more visible as time continued. The advisors really are our best vehicle to get this information from our students. So what we really done is make sure our advisors are aware what's happening with the emergency fund and how that works. It essentially is an added layer to the work we do with our students, right? We try to make sure our students have access to other resources and are aware of what other things they're entitled to, whether it be from their college or through New York City programs. But again, our emergency funding is that additional layer or financial safety net at the end of the day. It plays into part with our deal model as well. So our deal model, this is really that affordability piece of our work, making sure that our students are seeking out affordable options and resources as well. The other piece of this work is kind of just the evolution of how the work has transpired over the years. So pre-COVID, we had a smaller budget. And again, it was more word of mouth. Advisors would let us know that a student needs X amount of money for something, and we'd have like a little form that they would go through. Most requests were approved, it's first come, first serve. Today, though, the budget line, if we go fast forward to today, the budget line is a part of our budget line for New York, right? It used to be something that was a little small and occasional, but as of right now, it's a part of our regular budget line. And that's really, and also thanks to JFU supplemental funding that we received, as well as some from Summerfield, a $600,000 grant for long-term support. Then we also formed a team to support with this work. So Katie mentioned that a little earlier. And that is a committee. The team was one to just make sure we have a formalized process in place. So when Katie joined Bottom Line, she was tasked with really kind of overhauling the process and making sure that it was equitable as much as possible, given that a lot of requests were coming through. We also formed a committee to really review these requests as well, to make sure that we were able to really look at what the students needed and make sure this is what they actually needed. Sometimes students will request things, but not understand their financial aid packages. So we really want to dive deeper to make sure that they are getting what they need, as well as we're distributing the funds as equitably as possible. We also had our student advisory board play a big part in this work, which is really exciting to get input from our students. The student advisory board, Katie met with them, and one of the biggest suggestions that they made that really resonated with us as staff was around how to talk about this resource, and that was to change the name from a scholarship. Scholarship, they said, made them think there was like some sort of GPA requirement, only select students were eligible. It kind of was gatekeeping, if you will. So they had suggested that we change it to emergency funding to be more encompassing of all the requests and need that the funding does provide. So that's something that really resonated with staff when we made that change last fiscal year. Pass it back to Victoria.
Great. Hopefully this gives folks kind of an overview of how this work has evolved, and really a special shout out, and I know Rimsha put it in the chat, to JFU and Summerfield, who are critical partners in this work and really investing in this emergency funding and basic needs support for our students. Thank you to them. So what is the impact of the emergency funding supports for students and in our program, right? Ideally, this is helping us see how are we measuring impact?
Definitely happy to speak to this one. Essentially, where a lot of our students' more privileged peers might be able just to focus on college, a lot of material hurdles are getting in the way of their ability to thrive. And we see the purpose of a really strong emergency fund project as clearing as many obstacles as possible to ensure that our students are in a place where they're feeling cared for, they're feeling stable, and they can really just focus on whatever it is that their personal goals are moving forward. So for example, we're right in the middle of final season. It's going to be really hard to focus on just doing a great job studying all of your notes if you are also struggling to put food on the table. So the emergency fund at its best really is about relieving external pressures where possible. We have such a knowledgeable advising staff, and they are often able to help students clear hurdles. For example, potentially working on an appeal with a financial aid office if there is an outstanding tuition balance. However, in other cases, a student has really exhausted every option and just has an outstanding material need. So that's where the emergency fund comes in. We've heard really important feedback from students about the impact of this funding on their ability to persist and just have a huge kind of burden lifted off of them in general. Here are a few individual messages that we pulled as examples from our students. Again, wanted to be careful to pick only very anonymized ones, but these examples include a student and their sibling who's also in the Bottom Line Success Program, where we were able to help prevent a pending eviction through this funding, a student who needed assistance with their final tuition bill before graduation, a student who needed some support with grocery expenses, and a student who was also having challenges with the cost of transport, really just getting to class and even being able to attend Bottom Line meetings in person. So that is just a few of many students that we've been very fortunate to be able to support through this work over the years. We are kind of working on longer term technology improvements that would allow us to quantify this impact even more strongly. In the meantime, do have some evidence from the Coach Dreamer Real Scholars program within a different corner of Bottom Line that funding really does result in a tangible increase to students' engagement with the program, as well as their persistence in college. So that is really exciting and gratifying to see. We definitely see that in terms of individual stories coming back from students and from advisors, and look forward to getting more data over time for the emergency fund as well.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I think that both the quantitative, right, that we see students are more likely to engage with the program, more likely to graduate, and just hearing the impact that these dollars have on their lives is really obviously affirming in terms of this work. And I know the emergency fund has their own inbox where students can share messages of appreciation and really love to hear kind of how this helped support the student and ideally kind of got them over a really tough time in their lives, to Katie's point, kind of then be able to focus on their academics, which is our driving mission. So advisors are the first contact a student makes, typically for an emergency fund request. That's where their relationship is strongest, right? That's the person they talk to most frequently. So would love if you both could talk to a little bit of the learnings and best practices that advisors are learning in terms of how they work together with students to address these challenges.
Yeah, so as Victoria mentioned, our advisors are the ones our students speak to the most often. The advisors understand, what is really happening with their students, whether it be academically or personally. So they're the ones that we really use to understand what resources our students need. One of the big answers to that was to create a student resource website that's updated regularly. This resource is definitely helpful for students to have access to regularly. So even without their advisor, they have this link. We share it regularly with our students so they can check it out. It has information around lots of different resources throughout New York City. And if a student's denied a request, this also is included in the email that they receive for the denial. And advisors make sure that they, go through this website with the students so that they can, maybe look for some specific things that could potentially help them with what they are going through. We also we'll be working with some of the different organizations on the resource guide to come to our success team meeting. So we meet every Monday as a team. And in those meetings, we're going to have them just kind of really go through the resources they offer and the best way to get students connected to these resources, and even proactively get connected to these resources, right? So before a need maybe is had, how can we get them connected to these resources proactively? So that's going to be happening in the spring semester. We also have a a social work contractor on staff, which is really exciting to support us to do a deeper dive into the mental health resources at CUNY. So the majority of our students do attend CUNY colleges throughout New York City. And we wanted to make sure we have an understanding of what resources they have there. And again, how to get students connected there. So we had a meeting this past week with our social worker to really kind of go through what that looks like, and also how to share that information with students and how to have those conversations with them. That information is listed on the resource guide, but we went through like a deeper dive, which was really great. We also use the success team channel again to be on our team's channel to really continue to support each other and to crowdsource, if you will, information to make sure that, sometimes we know of independent resources that we may have used or we had a friend use, and that may be relevant to what students need. So an advisor may ask a question and we'll be able to provide some additional suggestions in that space. Other scholarships as well are listed here. Sometimes, depending on a student's identity, they may be qualified for additional scholarship opportunities. That's also listed on the resource guide. And Katie is also great of sourcing that information and posted it on Teams. We hopefully want our students to bring their whole selves to the meeting with a bottom line advisor, and that will include sharing this information with us. So again, that we can support them in the best way possible. Students usually meet with their advisors 2 to 3 times per semester. So during those conversations, in addition to supporting them with their academic work and needs, we're also supporting them in that holistic space as well. We will have another poll, and this is a copy of the resource guide, what the website looks like, the landing page. Definitely encourage everyone to take a look at it. It's really a helpful guide for our students, and we're always looking for additional resources as well. So if you know any, please feel free to share them in the chat as well.
Thanks, Janelle. Yeah, I think this speaks to this isn't work that just Bottom Line is doing, right? Lots of folks understand the importance of basic needs support, tuition support, book support for students, especially the population that we serve. And so we couldn't do this without a community of partners, right? And I think the purpose too of the emergency funding stream is this isn't an ongoing necessarily support, that we're helping students get sustainability in their lives that are going to allow them to move forward, right? And not necessarily kind of come back and be needing the support in the long term, because unfortunately that's not a financial situation that we can offer to them. And so I think the resources that Janelle and Katie and the team have compiled are really tremendous, and thinking about there's lots of great work happening here in New York and within the schools that our students go to, and how do we help them access those resources and do kind of warm handoffs, walk them to those spaces, help uncover things they might not have been aware of on their own. And if you are interested in taking a look at the website, it is in the chat, so feel free to peruse there, and then would welcome, as Janelle shared, any other resources that folks on this call might know about. Please do share. We'd love to have them. So we're gonna do another poll and think about what are some of the most requested needs of our students. All right, let's see what we got. So 39% of folks said course materials, 30%, and then a tie, 30% for housing. Katie, you want to walk us through the details?
Sure. Here's our grand reveal. So course materials is the #1 kind of most common request that we receive for this fall. This would be a good place to drop a quick clarification that we have a course materials application that is its own process. That was the idea of one of the 2 fantastic senior advisors on this project, just to make sure we are really expediting those requests, getting textbooks to students as soon as possible once the semester starts. And then all of the other requests here represent things that come through the general emergency fund application. So those who said transportation, you are also sort of correct. Transportation is the most common request we see through the general application process, followed by tuition, food, housing, utilities, and other. We've also included a look at a little more detail on what other entails on the right side of this slide. So you can see mostly more basic needs security requests, small handful of students who missed the course materials application deadline, so we just kind of rerouted them. A handful looking for student loan payoff as well, which unfortunately we didn't have enough funding to support with, given that other students were looking for more immediate tuition balance payoff at the time.
Great, thanks, Katie. Hopefully that gives folks a little bit of a snapshot in terms of where the need is. There's obviously lots of different needs that our students emerge with, but seeing the trends is helpful to understand kind of those pockets. And so you've seen the snapshot, right? And then kind of Katie, turning back to you to go a level deeper into that need and kind of how we're addressing it.
Great, thanks, Victoria. So this slide was one that we recently worked on data for and found just to be a very powerful, quick illustration of the scale of need we're looking at for our student population. I've worked at Bottom Line and on this project for a little over 2 years now, and every single semester have seen the number of applications continue to rise. Part of this is that we feel we're doing a stronger job just asking every single student about their need. We have really made a conscious decision to switch from a word of mouth system to a system that gives all students access to the same information about the emergency fund being available to apply to. In the large majority of cases, students do tell their advisors things that are going on, but in some cases, a student feels very uncomfortable volunteering a personal sensitive need at all. And the emergency fund is really the way that they are feeling comfortable sharing that with us at all and letting us know that they need help getting through a challenge in their life. So you can see specific numbers that we're looking at over the years. For this fall semester, we received a record number of applications, and you can see a pretty stark gap between the amount we were able to approve for essentially everything other than course materials, which made up a budget line of about $15,000 on its own. That left us with $35,000 total to distribute for all other types of requests students were making, whereas the actual dollar amount that students were asking for was nearly $300,000. So really seeing a lot of requests come from our students, really seeing a powerful illustration of how much these material obstacles are interfering with their ability to persist in college and just be able to thrive in general as young people working on their goals and trying to move forward in life.
Katie.
Thanks. We would also like to offer a little more detail on what our decision-making process looks like. So of the 2 senior advisors who are on this project, one really takes the lead on managing the committee review process. The current process that we have is, as I mentioned really briefly earlier, any requests that are over $1,000 per student go to this larger team of 6 total committee members. We feel it's very important to leave these decisions to a space that has as many voices, experiences, and perspectives as possible. It's a big decision for any individual staff member to make, and we have a very thoughtful committee that is very thorough in the questions they ask and the way they seek to understand each student's needs very thoroughly through this process. The senior advisor who manages the committee meetings themselves is also doing a lot of one-on-one communication with every student who has made a large request to the emergency fund. So he's reaching out to them one-on-one, getting a little more context on what it is that they're asking for, looking for any follow-up information that we might need to make sure their request is very clear to us. The committee then meets bi-weekly to review an anonymized version of each student request. We also feel that this anonymity is very important to a decision-making process that is as equitable and unbiased as possible. So that is work that the senior advisor in charge of the committee does to make sure all of the details on the application are not identifiable. If there is a committee member whose student applied to the emergency fund, typically they will offer a little bit of context that we might be looking for, answer any immediate questions that the rest of the committee might have for them, and then kind of step back from voting for that student, again, in the interest of ensuring as much fairness as possible, really, in this difficult decision. Finally, from there, any requests that are approved, there is a payment processing step. So in the large majority of cases, an approved application leads to the emergency fund team directly paying a bill. If, for example, a student is looking for rental assistance, we will figure out how to pay their landlord. If they are looking for assistance with a tuition bill, we will figure out how to pay their school. So that process takes a little bit of its own time as well. And again, always requires close communication with students so that we are all on the same page and working as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Katie. Obviously, folks on the call can see the tremendous thoughtfulness and care with which the team brings to this process, especially given that these are quite sensitive needs, right? And students are being really vulnerable and courageous and coming forward and kind of naming a need that they may have. And also that it takes a lot of time, right, to do this well in terms of reviewing the core requests, making it as much of an equitable process as possible, and providing resources to students and processing the actual payments, right, which is not insignificant. And making sure we have the financial documentation we need as an organization. And so just want to acknowledge all of the work that goes into this from all the team members involved. Great, so we have one kind of last question and then we're gonna do Q&A. I saw one question come through in the chat, so if other folks have things that they wanna surface, feel free to start popping them in the chat so we can bring those forth for Q&A. But what do we wanna see moving forward, right? How is this work going to continue to evolve?
Happy to kick us off in an absolute dream come true vision for the future that I think we all at Bottom Line share. We really would love to see our students not end up in crises in the first place. A huge part of the dream behind this work is just making sure that students are not in an emergency in the first place. That said, we unfortunately have only so much funding, only so much staff capacity. Our long-term goal is really to think about how to break down as many of those systemic barriers as possible and address system repair. In lieu of being able to do that at this very moment, here are some other ways that we are kind of more immediately able to commit to action steps. The first being thinking deeply about campus supports and partnerships with other organizations that are doing related work, offering resources that we might be limited on our ability to provide directly. So I mentioned one of the two senior advisors on the project leads the committee review process. The other senior advisor on the project is going to be leading a lot of work around strengthening these referral pipelines and partnerships, and really thinking about where do some of these external parties come in when we are short on funding ourselves, but a student is still in need of additional support. So that is something that we are very committed to and looking forward to taking some positive steps in very immediately. Turn it to Janelle, I think.
I think the other piece that we really want to strengthen and focus on is like our student resource guides. Make sure those are sustainable resources and they have pathways that our students can follow through. So again, we've started trying to connect with some of these community partners as well to make sure that our students are aware of what's out there and what they're entitled to. That's a really big piece of it. And the other piece is, making sure we're getting students to graduation and that they have the affordability at a forefront for that and they have the right resources to reach graduation. So whether that be they need support with course materials, tuition, transportation, living expenses, anything like that, that we are really trying our best to find ways to get them what they need, whether it be through Bottom Line or through an external organization.
And the last two things I would add is Janelle spoke to earlier that Summerfield invested $600,000 in a endowment seed funding, essentially, to try and fund this work. And so one of our goals is to build that, right? And actually be able to use the disbursement of that fund for emergency funding every year, as opposed to building it directly into our budget, which is obviously taking resources from other aspects of our program. And we want to make sure we have sufficient funds to be investing in this work year over year. And then the other piece is, I saw Stephanie's question in the chat around Google Forms, and I won't speak to that quite yet, but I will share that this work is time consuming, right? You heard Katie talk through the process. There is a lot of kind of technical aspects to it. And so we are in talks organizationally to think through not only for emergency funding, but for a bunch of different scholarships we disperse in terms of partnerships. We work with the Coach Foundation, we work with the Fellowship Initiative through JP Morgan Chase, and we also work with some smaller scholarships to disperse to students. All of that takes manpower, all of that takes time of staff members. And so we're always thinking through efficiencies there. And so we are in talks with basically scholarship providers to partner with in order to disperse these funds. in a way that reduces the staff burden. Of course, you heard us also talk a lot about sensitivities and vulnerabilities of the students and this decision-making process that goes into dispersing these funds. And so that is something that we are considering in that process too, because there is a very human element of this process as well. And so we don't want to lose that with a potential shift. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and move us to Q&A. I see a couple in the chat, so I'll give voice to those, and Katie and Janelle, feel free to take them. So the first one from Addison is, why do you have a separate budget and distinct application process for course materials?
Happy to take this one. This was a great idea from one of the two senior advisors on the project, so I want to shout him out for that. The main reason is really just speed of getting course materials to students. Previously, it was all one big application. As Victoria mentioned, this work does take a lot of time, so we are always seeking ways to move faster and more efficiently. That said, it was occasionally late October by the time we got to a textbook request for the fall semester with our previous process more than a year ago at this point. So the new course materials application being separate has allowed us to get to every request within 2 weeks of the start of the semester, which is a huge improvement in terms of students knowing where they stand, with Bottom Line being able to buy them a textbook or other crucial item or subscription that they need for a class they're actively enrolled in. In terms of the separate budget, behind the scenes, it is all one big budget. That's more a reflection of us setting an amount that we are prepared to spend just on course materials versus us also saying, okay, we also have a huge amount of need coming forward in the areas of tuition and basic need security. So we also need to make some hard decisions around reserving enough for that, that we are still able to offer a robust general emergency fund.
And I might kick it back to you too to share a little bit more about the current process. Stephanie was asking if we were still using Google Forms or what our current application process is.
I can answer that. So we're no longer using Google Forms. So partially one, there were some security concerns with Google, making sure that students are sometimes sharing sensitive information. So we've moved away from that. We're using Microsoft Forms. Our Bottom Line uses Microsoft Office for our work. So that's also partially the reason we've moved to that system. And we collect all sensitive information from students via secure email as well. So that's another way we get that information. And our funds are currently available to current college students. So students are typically who are enrolled in college. In rare cases, a student may have recently graduated, may need support with an application for grad school. Like that is on if we have enough funds available. So that happens occasionally, but typically I would say it is for current college students.
Thanks, Chanel. We do also award some funds to students who are currently active in Success, but are not enrolled in the exact semester they're applying for funding in, just as one additional brief note.
Great, thank you both. And to speak to that too, so this is focused on our Success and Persistence program. In terms of access supports, we do have student fee assistance for access. That is primarily focused on college application fees and also on enrollment deposits. We have seen more significant need arise, I would say, with our college students in terms of the basic need support than we have on the access side, though certainly that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist there as well. And so certainly appreciate that question. The next one I saw, and I'm going to read it here, is from Jim, was the information regarding primary needs cited earlier based on money that was distributed or based on the money that was requested via applications? And Hannah, maybe we can actually go back to that, and Katie, so Katie can speak to it while it's up.
Good, thanks for the great question. So looking at just fall as an example, the number in green is the number that we were able to award to students each of these 3 semesters from the General Emergency Fund. So basically everything but course materials across these 3 most recent semesters. The number in red was the actual total dollar amount requested. So in some cases, a gap is accounted for by students who unfortunately just weren't able to receive funding at all. So they may have applied right before the deadline, whereas we mostly have to operate on a first come, first serve basis. A lot of these were also partial approvals. So for example, a student might have said, I'm in a very unstable place on housing. I am seeking assistance with 3 months of rent. If we approved 1 month of rent, That is huge. Don't want to minimize the impact of that funding. Just to illustrate the scale of student need, we did also want to reflect that a partial approval is kind of a distinct situation, and there was still a shortfall there for that individual student.
Thanks, Katie. And I think if you go back, Hannah, to even the previous slide, I think maybe this was also part of the question. One more. Sorry, to the bar graph. Yes, thank you. I think, Katie, was this all requests or was this funded requests?
Oh, yes, sorry. Might have misunderstood the question. This was all requests. We also counted, trying to think of the words that make the most sense to explain. We counted each category as its own request for this slide, just to see. So for example, a student asking for food insecurity support and tuition payment would be reflected in both of those numbers. Our total number of applicants for the fall general emergency fund was about 184 off the top of my head. And our total number of course materials requests was this number here, so 170.
Great, thank you, Katie. And to give folks context, I think I put this earlier in the chat, we serve about 1,650 students each year in our success program. So that gives you a little bit of an insight into the number of students that are presenting with significant need. Seeing another question, assuming you need to be a bottom line student in order to be eligible for the fund, if we know students would really benefit from the fund, how difficult, long of a process would it be for them to become a bottom line student? Love a recruitment plug. I can speak to a little bit. There are 2 entry points into the bottom line program. You do need to be a bottom line student in order to be eligible for these funds. Students can become bottom line students prior to their senior year of high school and joining directly into our access program. Our application will open on February 1st if you know any current high school juniors. And then in terms of our success students, we do have a separate entry point directly into that program. It is prior to college matriculation. So we are not taking students who completed a year or 2 or 3 years of college. They have to join with us prior to their matriculation that first year. Is educational technology, i.e. laptops, in play via requests?
Great question. Happy to take this one. So one place that it shows up a lot is actually in our course materials award. I feel like I am still a fairly recent grad in my own head, but less recent every year. Students more recently are being required to sign up for a lot of subscriptions and web platforms for their courses. So my assumption before getting deep into course materials work was textbooks, physical items, great. There are actually a lot of online platforms that we're seeing for specific professors' requirements to enroll in a class. To speak more specifically to laptops, that does sometimes come up as well. So we have fortunately been able to buy some laptops for students through the emergency fund. That just is a request type that we tend to be extra curious for additional context on, given that there are so many pressing needs students are sharing with us. We don't have a lot of funds to go around, so do try to have a very full picture of how that educational technology is going to support them and be a critical part of their needs before making an approval for a laptop. So it is definitely something that does come into play, but not one of our most approvals.
Any other questions from folks on the call, either via the chat or feel free to come off mute as well. Okay. Well, we really appreciate all of you joining us today, and specifically for Katie and Janelle for sharing a little bit more about this work, and obviously to the entire emergency funding team for all of the work they do each day to support students, and then of course to all of our advisors who are supporting students day in and day out and recommending students to apply to this fund for those who are presenting with significant need. So feel free to ping any of us if you have further questions. Katie, myself all have our emails up here, and then if you are interested in the QR code, you can support our work here at Bottom Line, right? We're doing critical work every day. Again, part of which is the emergency funding and the ways in which we're supporting both course materials and basic needs support for our students. So all of you are so valuable partners in this work, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Janelle or Katie, any closing thoughts that you would offer?
Just that I think this work is really important, and we really appreciate having the time to share it with everyone so they get a little bit of an insight on how we are best supporting our students. So thank you.
Yes, definitely would echo. Thank you so much to everybody for the thoughtful questions and active engagement. We are very proud of the impact we've been able to make for our students, and also very focused on how to do an even better job in the future. So really appreciate this conversation and the opportunity to share more about the work.
Thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day and happy holidays.